Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The program will begin momentarily. Please welcome the Atlantic's Margaret Lowe.
Good morning, good morning, thank you. I am Margaret Lowe and I'm president of AtlanticLIVE. It's the team that brings the Atlantic's journalism to life on stages across the country. And we are so happy to be here in New York City to talk about the future of retail. We hope you had enough coffee to fuel your day and that it feels good to be in the dream downtown away from this stifling heat outside. In any case, welcome to Consume. It is wonderful to see so many of you here. We're going to explore the way the consumer demands are changing and how shopping is evolving as a result. Americans spend trillions of dollars every month on goods and services, and new technologies have made it so easy to buy and to sell, and many of today's consumers now expect an experience that feels personal, and they also expect convenience and efficiency every time they decide to make a purchase. We know that legacy brands have had to adapt to survive, changing the way they market their products, design their stores, and connect with customers. And new brands have emerged that have upended the way we shop with personalized subscriptions, same-day shopping, and rentable everything. We have a magnificent lineup of speakers this morning. We have a great audience here too. Here in the room with you are business leaders, marketers, researchers, influencers, and journalists, all of us together navigating these disruptions. So by the end of this morning, we hope that you'll have met people who inspire you, encounter ideas that reshape your thinking, and that perhaps help make sense of today's retail landscape. Before we roll, I want to take a moment to thank our underwriter, Nestle, for making this morning and our journalism possible. We're enormously grateful for your support. They'll talk about it a little bit, but if you get a chance, do check out their display before you go, which shows how they're trying to match consumers' desire for sustainability. And now a few practical notes. Please silence your cell phones, but do keep them close. We'd love you to join the conversation on Twitter at AtlanticLIVE. The hashtag is AtlanticConsumed, And undoubtedly, you'll have plenty of your own good questions, so we're going to leave time for Q&A throughout the morning. With that, I am so pleased to introduce our first guest, the CEO of Birchbox, Katja Beauchamp. And here to lead the conversation is my colleague, Atlantic staff writer, Amanda Mall. Amanda and Katja.
Thank you.
Hi. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I'm Amanda Mall. I'm a staff writer at The Atlantic. I cover contemporary lifestyle. This is Katja Beauchamp. She's the CEO and founder of Birchbox. And we're going to talk a little bit about her business, her customer model, how things have changed, and where they might be going in the beauty industry and beyond, just in retail in general today. Thanks for coming.
Very excited. Impressed you already filed a story.
Yes, I filed a story
Very
before I came in.
productive morning.
Journalism must go on. So in 2010, you and your co-founder founded Birchbox. At the time, really the only thing you could subscribe to were newspapers, magazines, things like that.
Yeah.
Now, 9 years later, you can subscribe to furniture, all kinds of things. Practically anything you can subscribe to now. Birchbox sort of is the inflection point in a lot of that, I think. How did you decide? How did you come up with the idea to subscribe to beauty samples?
So I think the first thing that I feel is important to understand about Birchbox is that we never set out to start a subscription business. In 2009, just at the end of the year, my co-founder and I were in business school, and we saw an opportunity in beauty. Basically, we were shocked to see that in 2009, almost 2010, less than 3% of beauty was sold on the internet. And we were like, that seems like an opportunity. It seems like more people are obviously going there to write about beauty, to review, look for reviews, look at content, but the purchase wasn't happening. And we got curious about why. And we came up with two hypotheses about why based on us as consumers, and they were very simple. And that was, there was too many choices in beauty, and the internet actually makes that worse. At least in four walls, it's finite, right? Like, it ends. But if you were to Google, like, kill yourself, Google best moisturizer, and you were gonna be like, huh? How are there like a million options that go from $10 to like $1,000, right? It's a ridiculous quest on the internet. And the second thing we realized was that people required trial before purchase if they were gonna change behavior. And we were in business school, very kind of practical about it, and we thought, this seems like a big problem for an industry that is so focused on newness, so focused on new launches. The beauty industry launches hundreds of thousands of new things a year, and the customer's overwhelmed by the choice and requires to try it to change behavior. And we were like, this seems like a big opportunity. How could we address it? And that is how we came up with this idea that we could push a little bit of trial in a way that felt digestible, finite, personal, and that could then lead you to, over time, really just change your behavior in beauty. Trade up in some cases, add to your routine, but it would feel very doable. And our vision was that it would feel like your best friend who was a beauty editor. So the reason that was really important is that beauty editor obviously has access to everything, but the idea that your best friend is the editor means that they know you, they choose for you, and they care. Right? And from there we said, okay, well, how could this work? And we realized, well, we can use samples, we can send it to you monthly, and then we came to this idea that we'll use a subscription revenue model. Subscriptions aren't business models, they're revenue models. And we got excited for sure. We were like, that's awesome, high five. Subscription seems good. And then we launched it as a test while we were still in school, and honestly spent my entire life savings, which was nothing, to just, buy the domain, buy some boxes, and we made our money back immediately. And it was that idea of like the power of subscriptions, which, in its most pristine sense is a negative working capital business where you get paid before you ship your goods, is really profound, and it definitely created a lot of like momentum behind being able to build the business and capitalize it.
One of the things your company does really well is serve customers who are interested but not like addicted to trying new things, trying new beauty products, things like that.
Yeah.
It provides a mode of discovery.
Yeah.
The beauty industry existed for decades, forever, before you came along to try and target those customers.
Yes.
Why do you think they were overlooked for so long?
So just to clarify, the beauty industry is focused on the consumers who love beauty, the obsessed consumers, maybe going down to people who are very excited. So 20% of the market the beauty industry really focuses on inspiring that customer, creating product for that customer, creating retail experiences for that customer. And the rest of us are just invited to partake in this when it's not our value system, right? But I think the reason is really simple and logical. If you go back decades, you had, 4 channels on television. Like first there's radio, then we have TV. There's 4 channels. There's, you basically have everybody watching the same thing, and you can advertise to this consumer. And of course you're going to choose to talk about, about your industry and about your product to consumers who love it. Now, fast forward to today, we are able to just be very nuanced in thinking about who a target customer is. And when we started Birchbox, my co-founder and I were just women who did not obsess about beauty, would never have read a beauty magazine, used it, but just felt kind of perplexed by why it felt hard to feel good using it. Like it felt like we were buying things that were a waste of time or too expensive, and we didn't love it. And we thought that was ridiculous. And that was, the early days of Birchbox in 2010. But in 2014, we looked at the industry because we were industry outsiders. She was a consultant, I was in finance. And we saw something that should have been obvious, but it was a really profound moment for us, which is every beauty retailer is focused on this customer who's obsessed, the Sephoras, the Ultas, and that customer represents the majority of their revenue. Now we were focused on our problem, ourselves, our value system in beauty. And we were far over indexing in women who were fine to apathetic about beauty. And they would come to Birchbox kind of skeptical and then double their spend in the category within a year. And for us, that just became really interesting. We were both economics majors, and we were like, we're so much more intrigued by the idea of growing a pie than taking our slice. It just seemed more interesting. And it's hard because our customer is, by definition, less interested in beauty.
Right. How do you find...
Not looking.
How do you find people that are, by definition, just less engaged, not looking for you?
You talk to them the way that I think we all hope to be talked to. I'm less interested in beauty, and all of you have your different things that you're passionate about and different things that you're less interested in. But here's what I think, and here's what I think resonates with consumers. If it's a discretionary spend, it should be joyful. You don't need it. Right? And so it's ridiculous to think that for 70% of the market who are buying beauty, so this customer, the casual consumer, uses 11 different products in a daily routine. She still buys it, right? There's a lot of stuff to do. But she is not buying it with joy. She's not buying it with passion, but she's definitely purchasing. And for that consumer, this idea that her, dollars are no one's priority is ridiculous. And I think starting to talk about, even if you don't love the industry, you still deserve to feel smart when you buy it and feel like excited to use it. You don't have to just be resigned to the product graveyard or doing what most of our customers say. They've been doing the same thing since they were like 12 or 18. They're in their 40s now. They're like, I still use the same thing my mom took me to the beauty counter to get. And so our vision is like, we can take the work out, and then you can have this experience of discovery that really honors your values and really, speaks to how you want to participate. And I think in short, it's tricky is the answer. But in short, we just try to tell this story in a variety of ways. And our vision is to be at this intersection of utility and delight, but to remember all the time that we are defining delight for our customer. So delight for a customer who's not obsessed with beauty. And that's very different because every time, I go to different talks about beauty and beauty conferences, the way that everyone talks is as though every customer wants to look a certain way, right? Like everyone loves this idea of being totally made over and very much learning how to shape your face and contour. But my experience is that most of us are just trying to get out of the door and look like decent. And actually, I think most of us want to look like ourselves. You know, I don't think most women are like, all I want to do is transform. So from this angle, you might think I'm a celebrity. Most of us are just like, we're fine, you know.
Right.
We just want to look a little more awake. We want to look, you know, like we feel our best self. So I think just trying to have that conversation and say like, you are awesome. You deserve to be someone's priority. We've chosen to take this on.
Right. A small programming note. In about 5 minutes, we're going to go to audience questions. So please be thinking of them now. And please, when it's your turn, keep them short and ask them in the form of the question. Pretend we're on Jeopardy.
Do I have to say what is?
Yes, please.
Okay.
We're just going to do that for the rest of the talk here. So now I'm interested, you started your company in 2010, and then pretty soon after that emerged the twin behemoths of YouTube and Instagram.
Yeah.
And those...
What did we do before that?
I can barely remember.
I'm going to say something controversial.
Yeah?
I've been off of Instagram for 6 months.
Yeah? How do you feel?
It's a good life. It's a good life. And look, I feel like it's a very important part of how we've built the business, but I'm very curious about new paths. I was saying in the green room that, you know, one of the things I believe in about building a business, I'm sure several people here are building a business, is that if you have the choice to build a business for the world you want to live in, you know, build for the world you want to live in, right? And I think there's amazing things about social media, but I also think it's created a lot of challenges in terms of like people's connections and even, you know, our connection as a company with our consumer. Like our aspiration, our vision is to be forever useful and always delightful to our consumers. I mean, that's crazy, right? We want to be in your life forever. That is what we're saying. And this idea that we have, you know, 0.02 seconds to get your attention on social media and to like try to build this connection feels challenging. And I thought, you know, I've never been super excited about creating connections there. And I'm curious about whether if I come off, it will help me feel more creative and thoughtful about what's coming next, you know, what's happening with how consumers are trying to build those connections. Obviously, my team's still very much there. We're still doing a lot in social, but I said, you know, something is happening. I'm not alone in thinking that people are, you know, kind of overwhelmed by the amount of information coming at us. And as a company who wants to build a relationship with you, I need to be tuned into that and thinking about, well, what's the next way? Because it is getting harder and harder and extremely expensive, as you all know.
As far as sales go, there's online, and then there's still brick and mortar, which people are still trying to figure out how to do. The retail landscape has changed so much in the past 10 years. You guys tried retail stores for a little while. You decided to exit that market, and now you've started a new partnership with Walgreens.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you learned in your retail stores, and then how that applies to your retail efforts going forward?
So we actually didn't exit. What happened was this Walgreens partnership started while we had our own store. We still have another store in Paris, and it just started getting a lot of traction. And our lease was coming up, so we were like, we need to focus on something. It was a bit of a different model. And Walgreens came about because we started talking about this opportunity that we saw respectively in the markets, and we started talking about the casual consumer, and they were like nodding their head yes. They were like, this is the opportunity, this is the customer that we think we can win with too. You know, what if our experience in physical and your experience in digital and passion for this customer could create a really great experience? So we said, let's test it, and then let's see if this is working. And just like any test, our expectation was you put the test in the market and there's a lot of iteration before there's traction, and that just wasn't the case. So we just kind of became a little bit consumed in our team that's small, not really existent at the time for physical retail, was consumed by it. And we said, let's focus on it because we're so meaningfully changing sales in that channel for, prestige beauty. And now we want to know, could physical retail be a channel for acquisition for the subscription? So we put a lot of energy now into training for sales associates to talk about a subscription, which is different. So far, we've had some success early on, but we are just rolling it out now in 3,000 doors where all of the sales associates will be trained to talk about and sell a subscription on a tablet. So we've, just been really focused and curious. And I think this idea of, how do you have these real connections with consumers? How does that turn into customer acquisition? How does that become a big expansion of customer lifetime value and revenue? And then, trying to go fully into that has been the game. And I'm very interested in how this could affect the business and how it could really change our business, because the implications are really huge. I'm sure, as everybody in this room knows, if you're a primarily digital company, you're spending a lot of marketing dollars to acquire consumers. But I think what's always felt weird about that for me is that if you tell somebody about Birchbox, if you just say, our intention is for you to have joy in discovery and for you to feel it's efficient. And oh, by the way, you can get it for about $13 a month. And you can have this experience of discovery that really feels personal and contained. 9 out of 10 people are like, yeah. So I was always like, well, why are we spending so much money to convince people? It feels like there is a customer that's kind of readily available. And I think these conversations that are happening in stores are us understanding, is that the case? And then can we get excited about investing more in the experience of engaging with the customer in store, as well as the product, and how the product is the tool of customer acquisition and customer engagement and lifetime value. So I think it really gets to change where you spend your money on the P&L, and that is super exciting to me as the market continues to change.
Okay, we have time for 1 or 2 questions. The mic runners are coming around.
I think there's some here.
Yeah, hi, my name's Edward. I have a question about the sustainability practices of Birchbox. Can you tell me a little bit about that, please?
Yes. So great question, and definitely something that we're continuing to look at for 2020. So today we make all of our, the physical packaging of the product out of post-consumer waste, and everything is able to be recycled, and we do carbon offsets. But tomorrow the customer is definitely asking about options with less packaging, and we're very much excited and looking into that too. I think the beauty industry in general, you're starting to see slight inclinations towards reusables, but it's still extremely new. A world I want to live in, though, to that point.
Good morning. I wanted to, if you could speak a little bit about your suppliers. Has your model changed the manufacturing of products, or who is in the game?
Yes. So our partners are beauty brands, right? The brands that make all of the beauty products, many of which that are from the large companies like L'Oreal and Estee Lauder and LVMH. We also work with hundreds of small independent brands from all over the world. And yes, I know we've had a big impact on how they think of coming to market. So prior to Birchbox, kind of the paradigm for coming to market was that you had to get shelf space. I don't know how many of you think about that, but it's kind of the big play in retail. There's this classic case in business school about the beer companies fighting for linear feet. And so getting into shelves of major stores is how you start to get in front of customers before you have marketing dollars to do that. It's a huge inventory ask to create that kind of awareness this way, right? So to be in, some stores have thousands of doors. That is millions of dollars of inventory just to go to market, and hopefully it sells, right? And so Birchbox is a very different proposition for brands who, especially brands that don't have that kind of capital and size, they're able to take dollars that would be used on various things in marketing and or inventory and start to turn it into samples that immediately come with, on the other side, we purchase the full-size product, right? So they can immediately understand the value of acquiring a customer this way, but we're very much a partner in how you understand like the impact of it. Who is the customer that's interested? Is this product that you launched kind of a good, what we think of as a gateway drug to your brand? Is this the right thing to sample? We consult on that too. So we give a view on what we think will be a good product from that perspective. And the other piece of the industry that I know we've impacted because they love us so much are sample manufacturers. They've been exploding. There's a lot of new ones. And this is a whole new category that's just really grown because of Birchbox and other companies that use samples.
Okay, unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you all for joining us. Katya, thank you for coming this morning.
Thank you for having me.
And I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the talks today.
Next up, for a conversation about the sharing economy, please welcome Michael Barlow, co-founder and CEO of Furnish, and Lucas Dickey, co-founder and chief product officer at Furnish. Here to lead the conversation is Atlantic managing editor Adrian Green.
Very nice. Plush sofas.
Hi guys, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having great sofas. Adrian.
Yes. I was gonna say, so we're here to talk about furniture. And that makes me first think of moving, which is stressful in a big city. You're bringing couches up a fourth floor walk up, you're trying to reorganize a space for a new apartment, and if you're anything like me, then you're moving again in a year. What were the tensions you guys were thinking about when you created the company?
So I'll go first. I lived in New York after finishing college, moved here, lived with 3 roommates for a year, another set of roommates for another year, then by myself for a year, then packed up everything I had because I was sick of working on Wall Street and moved to Los Angeles to work in a storage closet at a startup. And over that time, we had a lot of fun experiences with furniture. I think the notable one is when my first 2 roommates and I were living in Stuyvesant Town. We didn't have a sofa for 60 days because we had analysis paralysis and trying to buy a sofa. So we bought this huge sectional, and then we were all moving out literally 8 months later. We didn't know what to do with it. We couldn't sell it on Craigslist, so we ended up sawing it into pieces.
Throwing it out the window.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just, public audience. But that's probably like that's my first experience owning furniture.
Lucas, crazy roommate story, go.
I don't have the crazy roommate story, but I have your moving cadence. So I did 10 moves in 12 years from Seattle to San Francisco to Los Angeles, dragging a somewhat willing significant other with me throughout each of those steps.
Mildly willing.
Yeah, now soon to be ex-wife, so maybe there's a correlation there. I'm not entirely clear. Michael said, don't make that joke. It happened anyway.
Here we are.
So that being said, I realized I was a lot like you, right? So you said, I'm just going to do it again in 12 months. And so that cadence hasn't stopped even post-marriage. So the last 6 years in LA, I've moved once every year. So service like this felt somewhat necessary for us, right? Like our generation who's moving every 12 to 18 months. Yeah.
So for those who don't know much about the company, tell us how it works. What kind of people are...
Again, I'll let Michael start and then I'll kick in.
So we're a subscription service for the home. Furniture as a service, circular economy meets furniture. It kind of depends who we're talking to is how we describe the business. But we give you the furniture you want for as long as you want it at one monthly price. And then at the end, you have the option to swap things out, add things on, walk away if you'd like to, and we'll come pick it up, or buy out the pieces, and you've already paid a portion of that retail value. So what we think of ourselves as is the urban young professional demands flexibility in home services, and we are that for furniture.
I think an alternative way, he also occasionally presents things as the easy button for the home, right? So I just moved
That's who we're talking
to
to.
home 1 month ago. Again, divorce in process right now. I have nothing, so I moved into a new home. I now have a fully furnished house, thanks to our service, and it happened over the course of one weekend, right? So I went to an e-com interface, picked out rooms. I know nothing, ironically, about furniture, though running a furniture business, but we have pre-curated rooms, and so I was able to pick out, a mid-century modern room that fit my aesthetic, and I was good to go over the course of a single session.
Where are you guys getting the furniture?
About 10 different places. We do some batch manufacturing ourselves, some landed wholesale in the US, and then we work with a few select retailers. So our largest retail partner is Crate & Barrel. We have a very strong relationship up and down that chain. We pitched the founder of Crate & Barrel via a handwritten letter, which we sent before we were pre-product, saying, are you selling furniture to people who are under 32 years old? Our thesis is no, because there's a lot of friction in buying large static assets. Let's do something together. And so that was actually a cool genesis of how that relationship began with Gordon Siegel, who's ultimately was the founder of Crate & Barrel.
Absolutely. The New York Times wrote an article about your company, and the deck was actually really funny to me. They said, owning nothing is now a luxury. How are you thinking about that? Why are people today more averse to owning things and renting them? A part of it is moving, but it seems more than that.
I'm going to use the heavy-handed phrase I love, like ownership it's a burden, it's a yoke, like the yoke of ownership. You're like, you can physically think of yourself carrying this sectional on your back, whereas with the move that I just did, yeah, it is heavy. The move that I just did, I literally carried nothing with me, right? And whether it was any subscription service that I'm using, and I'm somewhat a sucker for subscription services, Birchbox, Mint, wherever Katya is out there, I love the idea of not having to think about it, and it's flexible, it's convenient, and then any inspiration that kind of appeals to me at any given moment, I can take advantage of.
Adrian, I think I'll add is that what we've found talking to our subscribers is that it's not that people don't want to own anything, it's just they're less excited about tying themselves down as early on in life as the previous generation was. And so when you ask our subscribers, hey, you're signing up for our service 9 months, 12 months, you're tying the length of your furniture lease to the length of your apartment lease with your roommates, what do you plan to do at the end? A majority of people say, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do at the end. Are you kidding me? Do you expect me to know? I'm living, I'm new to this town. I have a new job. I'm 24 and I live with 3 other women. By the way, women are a majority of our customers today.
Yeah, that sounds kind of like when folks talk about the American dream, I think the old version of that had you found a job that you loved in a stable city and you bought a house and you filled it with stuff that you loved. And it feels like the folks who use your service are really running in the opposite direction of that.
Yeah, I think there's
ideal.
It's actually interesting. Occasionally people say, what's the vision for the business? I think an alternative is like, what's the vision for society at large, or how is secular trends or trends changing? And if people are moving every, it's 12 months now on average, 12 to 18 months now on average, with the subscription lifestyle, I can potentially end up moving every 6 months. I get my car through fare.com maybe, or maybe I just Uber and Lyft everywhere. Or if I'm in a scooter city, I'm Bird, Lime, any one of those transportation methods. Like heading down that path, it's inspiring for me. I love the idea of being able to live in New York and be in Chelsea for 6 months and then go to LA and live on the West Side and then move to San Francisco and then move to Seattle, and I feel free. I think there's like a correlation with freedom then through these subscription economy services.
Do you think that the furniture subscription industry is going to kind of take a hold? I know folks who would rent a car or rent a tux. I don't know how many of the folks that I would talk to would first think about renting a dresser.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. We did some customer surveys early on and said, would you ever rent furniture? And people were like, no, maybe, maybe not. And we're like, would you ever subscribe to, a home you love, so to speak, again, easy button for a home. Your furniture's there before you move in. It's set up. You can split pay it with roommates, and you can walk away with whatever. And they're like, yes, that sounds perfect for me. When in reality, on the back end, or at least logistically, it's a furniture rental business. And then one stat that we get excited about sharing is that 90% of the people who use our service had never before considered renting or leasing furniture prior to hearing about our service. So it's a little bit of branding, a little bit of marketing, but it's definitely hitting the flexibility and convenience, which is resonating.
Absolutely. You talked about kind of changing the American dream, if we're going to be a little dramatic, about injecting more flexibility into that. I wonder how that the tension exists there with sustainability. That furniture, for example, is one of the least recycled household items. How are you thinking about positioning your business and thinking about sustainability within that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we were chatting with the folks in the back, the Haagen-Dazs Nestle team and the Loop team about circularity and sustainability and how fundamentally that was what appealed to us. I mean, we have the great anecdote about throwing the furniture out the window, but I think the key point there is that we were throwing furniture away and knowing that 9.8 million tons of furniture makes it into landfill every year, and that there's a bunch of negative chemicals that make it into the water base. The idea that we can put a piece of furniture into a home and then we can take possession of it, refurbish it, clean it, and put it back into another home in a like new state, and we can do that n number of times, means that we're reducing our contribution to the landfill and those of our customers, right? So from a sustainability perspective, we love the idea of being able to give people things they want while also not necessarily have a negative impact on the footprint of the world around them. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, single-use plastics you talk about, but low-quality disposable furniture is definitely something that, as we were testing or validating demand over the course of 2017 for this service, we had a lot of anecdotes around people just walking away from IKEA, either in their the basements of their buildings, leaving it on the side of the road, etc. Not that we have anything against IKEA in any respect, but it's just like the anecdotes we were getting, and so we wanted to build an alternative.
Absolutely. When you are thinking about the future for Furnish, what does that look like? Is it right now you're operating exclusively on the West Coast? Is it expanding to the East Coast? Is it making it more accessible for possibly folks of a lower income than the urban professionals that you service right now?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start. So I think part of it is the geographic expansion right now. West Coast, there's plans, and we won't say a specific date, but moving towards the East Coast relatively imminently. There's expanding into other lines of things that you have within your home. So right now we have sofas. As of a couple of weeks ago, we introduced art decor and rugs, CB2 being a big partner as part of that. So if you're going to have an inspiring home, it can't be just the primary furniture pieces. You need all the other accent pieces with it. And in terms of moving, quote unquote, like down market into a more like cash-strapped audience, I think Michael can probably talk about
I think
that.
there's a big opportunity there too. There's some legacy businesses that exist in that space, public companies like Rent-A-Center, et cetera, that have big business models and not necessarily the best reputation. Or big businesses, at least top line, but not necessarily the best reputation. So is there a more transparent way to bring our service to that market?
I think
Potentially.
Yeah, there's certainly efficiencies that we will identify over time as our logistics and operations get more tight as we operate this longer and longer, that we'll be able to introduce the value and cost savings to another audience. I use the analogy of Tesla using the Model S to subsidize the Model 3, or Uber using the black car. You can find a bunch of other analogies. So our average customers right now is making higher than median income. We introduce those efficiencies and cost savings to the next generation of customers, and then we definitely can go through to a lower income audience, which is awesome.
Absolutely. One last question before we take it to the audience for questions. You talked about reputation. What as you think about that expansion, and as you think about transporting your values to different price points potentially, how are you thinking about your reputation and how it's communicated?
I mean, above all, we're a customer experience company, just like Amazon is a customer experience company. We take actually a lot of those principles that Bezos and Wilkie and team put together. And if you're doing right by your customer, you're doing right by the business in many respects. So I think maybe that's a reframing of your question, but that's like something that our whole team is very passionate about.
Lucas?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add to it on that front is like thinking about sustainability. This maybe is a little bit opening of the kimono, but we argued for a long time about whether we use the word sustainability at the earliest phases of our business while we were still learning things, right? Can you say you're a sustainable business while you are identifying, oh, that piece of furniture actually isn't sustainable and I need to rotate it out of the inventory? I fundamentally argue, and I think Michael did the same, like our goal is to be a sustainable business and to be a circular business, and so we can talk about what ostensibly we stand for. And so in terms of reputation, occasionally we may figure out we're not doing the best things, but ultimately we're going to try to fix that, mitigate it, and make things better going forward.
Okay. Questions?
Hello, my name is Bears, and thank you for your insight and your story. I'm the founder and CTO of Uppercase. We're an e-commerce tech company. So my question is about IKEA and their testing subscription business. They started doing it in February this year. How do you feel about that? What do you think?
It's a bit of a loaded question for us. So we just participated in IKEA's corporate accelerator partnership program called IKEA Bootcamp.
Yeah, so we just got back from Sweden. We're a big fan of what they're doing and what they're testing and what they're building. I think it's a rising tide here in terms of awareness. I think they're going to have a solution offered in the U.S. As well as abroad, and what can we say? What can we not say? We were part of their corporate accelerator, and we're very friendly with the team.
Yeah, I think going back to the, I'll take it slightly different, which is in terms of the rising tide floats all boats. If you go towards the mission part of our business, if IKEA can figure it out as the #1 furniture retailer in the globe, and they consume 1% of wood that's used anywhere in the planet, this is a good thing for all of us as humanity. They're embracing a circular business.
Absolutely.
In the back.
Hi. The prior person said that the vision was to be forever useful and delightful for Birchbox. Do you have like an overriding vision statement that you kind of pin everything to move forward when you pick your next direction?
Yeah, I think mission, vision, values are always somewhat shifting and evolving as the company grows, but we think everyone deserves a home that they love for however long they're in a certain space. And that's something that that's sort of our working vision statement right now. Hopefully helpful, but maybe Birchbox has had a couple more years than we have to iron that out.
One more.
Hi, I'm Linda, and we work for a branding and consulting agency called Fitch. So naturally, we were wondering whether you guys are measuring the impact of your model on the brands that you work with. So for example, like Crate and Barrel, is their branding considered higher, or people view them better because they work with you guys?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we do studies around, I call it measured incrementality in terms of business and brand awareness for our retail partners. And they're definitely strong and in the right direction. Can't share specific stats, but we're working closely with a couple on that because that's important to them.
I think the flip side of that is that Crate and Barrel has been around for 60 plus years, and so they're definitely paying attention to the impact of our brand and the relationship we have with them, and they're continuing to dive in deeper with us and exploring other opportunities to integrate our businesses further.
Yeah.
Here in the middle.
Hi, I'm curious about your refurbishing techniques. How much is really redone, and can you tell the difference, and how much is really thrown away?
Yeah, no, great question. It's obviously something we're passionate about, and we're learning a lot about real time. But we hired a number of people early on to help. One of which is here in the audience with us, who's a former CEO of one of the largest furniture rental companies in the world. And we were very curated about what furniture gets into circulation with us in terms of foam density on upholstery itself, the surfaces on case goods, whether they be high-use case goods or not, case goods being largely wood furniture, tables, dressers, etc. And then on top of that, the ability to refurb and the durability quotient associated with each. And so in some respects, we're a bit of a parts business, right? Because if we have what we'll call a coffee table as a high-use case good, we're buying the coffee table, but it's real wood that you're able to sand down and revarnish, and we work with our suppliers on all the different tones of paint and varnish and gloss associated. So we have these, I call refurbishing stations or corners in each of our warehouses in the cities where we operate, and so we're taking it very seriously. I think we've learned a lot and filtered out some suppliers over time, over the past year as product has come back, and it was not up to our standards. But it's something we're highly focused on.
Hi, I'm Linda. I'm from First Dibs. So it's a luxury marketplace. Our biggest vertical is furniture. So I wanted to ask, in terms of upholstered furniture, do you get any pushback? Like people feel weird about, say, a couch versus a dresser because there may be like hygiene issues. And also, I wanted to throw in what do you think about Rent the Runway getting into the whole home decor rental space?
I think it's smart of them. Very smart. I think they're doing throws and pillows right now. I think the logistical infrastructure for larger furniture items is a little different than how they're set up today. But I think, again, it's a big market opportunity, so they would be smart to think further about it. The other question was,
the first part was around upholstered furniture. Initially, we thought there would actually be more, we'll call it the icky factor associated with it. But when we ended up asking customers about, do you use Airbnb and do you stay in a bed in someone else's home? Do you go to a hotel and stay in a bed? Now, this is like drawing correlations between other icky factors, so it's not necessarily the best way to introduce it. But as soon as people started connecting all those dots, they actually had a lot less reticence around it. But we also emphasize the new state of everything we're doing and emphasize that we have this really thorough process.
So modular upholstery, most of our sofas actually you can strip off the cover and all that's left is the frame, and sometimes you even replace the foam. And so that's all kind of baked into all aspects of the economics of the business as well. But it's all, again, very, very important. I think a very slim percentage of people who don't use our service because they were worried about having used furniture. So that's not really one of the hurdles that we found as we pitched to the marketplace.
Absolutely. Okay, well, Michael, Lucas, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks,
Adrian.
For a session produced by our underwriter, Nestle, please welcome Tony Rossi, Vice President of Global Business Development at TerraCycle, and Alicia Enciso, the Chief Marketing Officer at Nestle USA.
Hi, everybody. I'm Alicia Enciso, and I am our Chief Marketing Officer at Nestle USA. And every day we strive to develop both great food and beverage products as well as brands that today are in 97% of U.S. households.
Hello, my name is Tony Rossi. I am the Vice President of Global Business Development for Loop and TerraCycle. And Loop is a TerraCycle business that just launched in the New York area and in Paris just over 2 months ago. And for us, our company's mission is to eliminate the idea of waste. And for almost 2 decades now, every business model that we create is there to help us achieve our mission. And Loop is our most aspirational attempt to solve for the idea of waste. And we're doing so with many big brands, including Nestle, who've helped us get this very complicated, but we think irresistible platform off the ground.
Katya mentioned, of course, and I loved it, built for a world that you want to live in. And I would tell you that at Nestle, we're doing exactly the same. And part of what we're doing, and we have a strong commitment, is that by 2025, we want to have all of our packaging be either reusable or recyclable. And so the partnership with TerraCycle in terms of Loop was actually a very innovative partnership that we were extremely interested in terms of creating a model that is leveraging the circular economy to truly leverage, again, these reusable packaging in products like what we sell, like Haagen-Dazs ice cream. But please, Tony, tell us more literally about the platform itself.
So the platform starts from a very simple point of view, and that is where there is single use, where there is disposability, we want to provide a circular, reusable option. So we have partnered with over 100 brands now around the world to help them make the move from single-use packaging, whether it's going to landfills or whether it's recyclable, into something more durable. So that's our core. What we need to do from there is how do we get it to consumers? And right now, Loop exists as an e-commerce subscription-based platform. So you can go on to loopstore.com, and today you have access to about 100 different products. As a consumer, you would order those products. We, as Loop, play retailer. We fulfill the consumer's order, and we send it directly to their door in that tote bag that you see back there. So even there's no shipping waste whatsoever in the platform either. Consumer takes out their product, they use the product. Behavior change really starts when that package is empty. Instead of throwing it out, instead of recycling it, it goes back into the tote. It comes to us at Loop. And should the consumer want another product, we are automatically going to replenish that order. It's not necessarily going to be in the same Haagen-Dazs ice cream you just sent back, but it might be Alicia's that she sent back 6 weeks ago and has been cleaned, sanitized by us at Loop, sent back to Nestle to be refilled and re-enter inventory. What's really important about what we're trying to build here is that in our experience running sustainability programs, like I said, for almost 2 decades now, we realize that when the consumer is given a choice between the most convenient option and the most sustainable option, while everybody wants to do the right thing, convenience usually wins 9 times out of 10. So how do we make a system that is built on reusability but still behaves like single use? So for the consumer, it's still a convenient option and they're going to want to participate. And oh, by the way, you're doing the best thing you can for the environment.
And Tony, do we have any early results? I mean, I think it's been like 6 weeks, maybe 8.
Early results are very, very strong. Haagen-Dazs Vanilla is the #1 seller by far. And I think what's really important about that is a huge draw is the package itself. You can all see it back there. I would argue that it's very beautiful. And what's interesting is that the consumer who perhaps isn't always attracted by sustainability is attracted by this platform because they really like the packaging. And it has a lot of functionality built into that packaging that's improving the way that you eat a pint of ice cream. And I think that's really amazing. And again, I've said this before, say it again, we are really trying to make sustainability irresistible. We want to draw the consumer into this platform.
You've talked, of course, as you said, to 100 brands, many marketers like ourselves. What has really been attracting marketers to the model?
I think it is, everybody is trying very hard to do the right thing. A lot of companies like Nestle have made goals and have made it their priority to move into recyclability or reusability. So we're providing the platform for them to enter into reusability. But we're doing it in a way that is core to their business. At the end of the day, we're still selling ice cream, we're still selling coffee, detergent, skincare, whatever it may be. So I think that was something that was really attractive. And if you look at reusability today, a lot of times it's just in bulk generic containers. So for us, I remember it was almost 2 years ago to the day that we were meeting with the head of innovation for Nestle Ice Cream here in New York, and we were talking about this platform and giving him the opportunity to say, like, go create something amazing. But it's still going to be branded Haagen-Dazs, right? It's still your brand, it's still your equity. And I think that's something that was really attractive and gets people to want to participate. And then on the other side of that, what's also interesting for a salesperson is I'm asking all of our partners to completely change the way that they do business, which isn't the easiest thing in the world. But it's amazing that so many people are trying and making a huge commitment to do so.
Absolutely. So in our case, it was the opportunity, of course, to give our consumers exactly what they are looking for, so much more sustainable options. At the same time, though, we were really interested in the model being so innovative and being able to participate in something that we're actually learning together. So do we have it figured out? Of course not. We are 6 weeks out. We are understanding, of course, okay, great trial. How do we get the repeat on the purchase? But for us, it was extremely interesting to be able to participate in such innovative and different platform. And we're very excited, of course, of having Haagen-Dazs there. Hopefully you can see what we've done with it. But more of our brands are coming along, and we've also put out there Chameleon Cold Brew, which is our next brand that is going to be joining the platform. But another element, Tony, that we've discussed is, of course, today it is an internet platform, but as we think about the forum today about being the evolution of retail, how are you thinking about expanding beyond the internet and complementing the model with that?
It's a great question. And I think when we look back at what we've done as a business as TerraCycle, now Loop, there's no silver bullet to sustainability. There's no one answer that's going to solve all of our problems. And I think when we look at Loop and how people are going to engage in reusability, we're taking the same approach. So while Loop today is an e-commerce platform that we run, we are also partnering with traditional brick and mortar retailers. Here in the United States, it's with Walgreens and with Kroger. In Canada, with Loblaws. In France, with Carrefour. And we envision building this idea, this engine of reusability into their existing distribution channels. And why that's important is it shows it shows scalability. Excuse me. And I think as we work with partners like Nestle, while a pilot e-commerce platform is important, showing scale long-term is equally as important, and we want to give consumers many different opportunities to engage with reusability. Some people may hate e-commerce, so we need to have reusable packaging in store, on shelf. So that's something that's really important to us as well.
Well, again, as Nestle, we are extremely excited to be able to participate in the partnership. One of the other things that we've done is this model has been extremely collaborative. Tony mentioned it's more than 100 brands. Many of us are big companies that are competitors, and we are very happy to share information of actually how we've developed packaging and how we are participating so that more brands can come along and that we can truly build the scale needed for the model to be able to sustain itself in terms of all of the different options that consumers have. So we're extremely excited to see where it goes, and we will continue to partner and learn together.
Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody. It's been an amazing reception to what we've created, and it's only going to get bigger and better. Thank you.
For a conversation on the influencer economy, please welcome Amber Atherton, founder and CEO of Zyper, James Nord, founder and CEO of Four, and digital content creators Sai De Silva and Kelly Augustine. Here to lead the conversation is Atlantic staff writer Taylor Lorenz.
Very deep.
I feel a little deep. Hi, guys. Thanks for coming. So just one thing is I might be looking at my phone. I am not Instagramming, but I did write some questions down here. So anyway, who here, first of all, has bought something that they've seen online advertised by an influencer? Okay, so a few of you, maybe 25, 30%. Why don't we start by saying, why do people buy stuff for influencers? For those who have never purchased something, James, you know better than anyone. This is a pretty big market, a growing sector of the economy. Can you talk a little bit about, why people purchase things from influencers and just the scale of this industry?
Yeah, I think part of it is that, for influencers like Sai, she's built her following giving advice to her audience for years and years. So there's like a trust thing, So I think that if you've never bought something from an influencer because you saw an influencer post about it, think about the friend you have in your group that you text when you need to go to the right restaurant, and you don't want to screw it up, and you know the person. That is what influencers are for people. They just don't know them, but they do feel like they have that relationship. So I think, when Sai says, hey, this is what I'm wearing or this is my skincare routine, there is this inherent trust between the audience and her that isn't transactional, right? It's not like seeing an ad. It's more like your friend saying, you should pay attention to this and buy this. And I think for a lot of influencers' audiences, they have been right a lot. They've probably purchased multiple things and they've been happy with those purchases. And so they're each time more inclined to trust them. So for advertisers, it's obviously, kind of a holy grail to be able to say I'm going to essentially pay someone to talk to, hundreds of thousands of people who feel like they're friends with this person and trust them and have them say, hey, you should pay attention to this product.
So James, you run FOR, which is a kind of influencer marketing company. You work with a lot of influencers like Sai and Kelly. And you guys, Sai and Kelly, are both content creators yourself, so you're out influencing people daily. Can you talk a little bit about what the job entails and the work that goes into it, and sort of maybe a little bit about how you got into this whole world?
Sure. I think that there's a little bit of a misconception that we actually work. I think people think that we just kind of take pretty pictures and then relax and hang out. But I think what you fail to realize is that we're always on 24/7. So it's not only are you every day out, you're sales. You're out doing sales, so you need to get your next check. On top of that, you are creating your editorial calendar. You shoot all of these things ahead of time. You're not just getting a photographer and someone's following you around all day. Everything needs to be strategically done. On top of that, you are checking emails. You are answering all the people that follow you because they follow you for a reason. So you have to keep up with your organic content. You are doing anything from showroom pulls, you're doing meetings, you're doing late night events, and the list goes on, and it's very tiring, I have to say. It's exhausting. And I think you won't know until maybe possibly following an influencer around and being in their shoes for a day, but I will say it is a very entrepreneurial job, and it takes maybe, I want to say anywhere between 10 to 15 hours a day is what you're putting into it.
Yeah, I often say that we are accountants, we're publicists, we're stylists, we're lawyers, we're everything to ourselves. And it's tiring. It is absolutely exhausting, and we work 24/7. 24/7.
So Amber, you kind of work in this industry too, but from a different angle. You at one point were, I would call you an influencer yourself. You were on a hit show Made in Chelsea. You founded a very successful e-commerce company, and now you run Zypher, which, can you talk a little bit about maybe how it's different than a traditional influencer marketing agency, and why you have a different view on things maybe?
Yes. So I would ask, how many of you have bought a product or watched a Netflix show because a friend recommended it to you? Almost 100% of the room. So what I would say is Zyper's positioning is that we are a community marketing platform. So we help brands identify their super fans, their genuine everyday consumers who love the brand, whether that's Kellogg's cereal or Tom's shoes, and turn them into this community. And they don't have to be public brand ambassadors. It's more like a focus group 2.0 for brands, where they can get real-time insights and maybe do creative content challenges, but really with their true fans versus influencers.
Professional influencers, you mean, right?
Professional influencers.
Got it. So, with I guess with an effective ad, whether it's from, a very loyal member of the community or an influencer, what makes an effective ad, from someone on social media? What are we've all seen the hashtag spawn, hashtag ad, but what makes a really good, compelling ad? James, do you have thoughts on this?
I have many thoughts. I think there's a lot of very basic stuff that, you need to kind of jump the hurdle first of just is it the right person, right? There was this thing going around in social last week of this brand that sent offers out to a bunch of influencers to advertise a baby stroller, but they didn't have kids, So it's okay, first of all, you have to make sure that this is the right person. So let's say we get over all those hurdles and we pick someone who could actually use the product. I think something we've been harping on a lot recently is making sure the influencer actually uses it. So as more money is flooded into this space, brands and the agencies they work with are briefing influencers, and you guys have probably seen this change over the last few years, where a couple of years ago they'd give you the product and they'd say, okay, I'll pay you or won't, do a post. Now it's here's the exact language I want, here's all the key messaging, here's kind of what the key features of the product is that I want you to hit, and you don't even have to use the product to be able to do a post about it. And so what has happened is because influencers don't have to use the product, sometimes they don't, and then there's no personal story to it, there's no connection to it. And so then you really have influencers holding a moisturizer up next to their face being I love this moisturizer, hashtag ad. And it's that is total trash. And the brand is might as well have just set their money on fire. So we try and make sure that in all the campaigns we're running, that influencers have time to use the product and find a personal story and a way to connect it to them in a way that feels authentic. So Sai, and I'll keep using her just because I know her and we're friends, can say like, hey, I've got 2 kids, I'm running around, like this product has been great because I don't have a lot of time in the morning. And so like, I can just throw this on and it feels really great and it's good. So it's like that creates this connection to the product that is real instead of her just like spewing out whatever the brand said is what makes this product great.
I think the onus is also on the influencer to know what will work for them and what won't, and to try to build that story, because a lot of people will just take the money and know that it won't make sense, but they're like, I'm just going to take this paycheck because it's being tossed at me. So I think it's up to us too to be a lot more responsible about what we choose to do.
Yeah, what is, I guess, like, what is that line between authenticity and I guess, just performing for the audience, and I guess, do you ever worry about selling out? Do you only advertise products? How do you kind of evaluate your brand deals? Do you only work with companies that you're very familiar with, that you yourself use? Or are you open to kind of new deals? And how do you strike that balance?
I'm lucky enough to be able to come on board and say, hey, that's not the right product for me. So if it's something that I feel is not organic or not authentic, I won't take on the partnership. And also executing, back to what you said earlier, executing a really good campaign, I need time to test the product. Or, for example, at least if I'm not talking about the product, on my stories, I like to have it in the background. If I'm doing a nighttime skincare routine, it's in the background. I'm not specifically speaking about the product, but you see it. And followers notice everything, especially on YouTube, every little thing. So if they see something constantly, they know that I'm using it. And I don't want to mislead anyone, because at the end of the day, a consumer is more likely to buy because their friend recommended it. And then influencers in people's heads are their friends. And we just have that relationship. So the minute that I take on a brand that isn't authentic to me, my followers can see right through that. For example, I'm not a big fan of GMO or non-organic foods, let's say. And then the next thing you know, I'm taking my kids to McDonald's. It's a lie. So, I mean, again, I think when a brand partners with someone, they just need to know their standards, their morals, what they're about, and then you need to come on and say, okay, is this the right partnership?
Amber, why is now the era, or any of, love to hear you guys chime in too, but why is now the era of the social media influencer? I feel like, for a lot of people, maybe people here, they've just really started to hear about this in the past year or two. But it seems like it's been bubbling for a while. James, you have been in the influencer industry, I think, also longer than anyone. So I'd love to hear from both of you guys, why now, and where do you think it's, coming from?
I think the barriers to entry are just so low now. You don't need to be an actress. You can build your brand on social media, and in that way influence has been so democratized. So Gen Z know that they can create a brand on social and become an influencer and buy followers and start getting free stuff from brands. Whereas I think our position in Zyper and why we've had a lot of traction so far is that there's this kind of return to wanting to work with real people and really validate that they have a connection to the brand. So instead of us having a pool of talent that say, oh yeah, we'd love to work with Dior, we will do the data deep dive for Dior and say, okay, right, let's analyze social, let's analyze your customer database and find who are your real genuine fans that genuinely buy the product, that are posting about it and engaging with you. And then we go back to the brand and say, okay, here are your real fans, versus people being able to put themselves up for that brand deal.
I guess I'm kind of curious in light of you mentioned teens, and I feel like a lot of teenagers, brand deals are aspirational for them, and they'll just relentlessly post about a product in hopes that the expectation is that the brand will eventually notice them. Is that something that you correct for, or how do you kind of determine who's really in it and who's just posting about it obsessively because they want that pedigree of having a brand deal with Evian or something?
Yeah, and there's so many granular metrics that we need to look at. That's not just content recognition, have they got the logo on their feed or have they mentioned it in their comment, but how often are they truly engaging with it? Have they actually bought anything from it? Are they going to the locations of the brand to identify a real connection? But it's still a challenge, I think, to really define, are they authentic? But it's something that we're still trying to work on every day.
James, I'm curious to hear from you. What are some surprising turns the industry has taken recently? Can you talk a little bit about, sort of like a little bit for people who don't know, maybe some more of the history of influence and what role do these platforms play?
I mean, play obviously a huge role. I mean, I think kind of to kick off from your other question, I think, this world is not new at all. I think a lot of the influencers you see now, 20, 30 years ago, maybe they would have been the accessories editor at Vogue or something like that, right? And so like there's always been influential voices. I think that it's just that individuals couldn't achieve scale, like enough scale to attract advertising without something like a Vogue or a magazine, a TV show, a radio station, or something like that. And like what's happened in this space is no different than like the music industry, where like you couldn't be a popular band if you didn't get on the radio, and you couldn't get on the radio unless you had a record label that could get you in front of the radio station. So the only way to be a successful musician was to get signed to a major label, and you were at the whims of like what those labels wanted to do. And then the internet obviously kind of blew that up. To allow kind of the direct access between fans and musicians. Same thing here, it's just that like they don't have to go through magazines anymore. And magazines in a lot of ways created, like I think some of the earliest influencers making money were beauty vloggers. And a big part of it was that like when Vogue was like, here's how you do a cat eye, it was just always white women, right? And so then these like other bloggers or people were like, hey, like if you're South Korean, this is how you do a cat eye. It's different, and there's no content for us out there, and so we're going to create this space. And then 10 years after that started, Vogue was like, oh shit, we're screwed because like we've missed this whole thing. So I think that like as you said, democratization of it, and the fact that like people can get their own scale has been the really kind of thing that's changed a lot. But the actual influential voices thing is kind of always been there. As far as like what's been surprising, I mean, I would say I was surprised at some of the hate thrown at influencers, but I'm not that surprised. I mean, ever since I started this company 7 years ago, and as you said, like I was a like Tumblr blogger back, I don't know how long ago. It was a long time.
James is the OG Tumblr.
I was like OG before obviously there was any money in the space. But there's always been the articles of just like every year it's this new thing of like the bubble is bursting, and like that article comes out and then the budget's double, and then the death of the blogger, and that comes out and the budget's double again. So like there's this like traditional media trying to invalidate what influencers do because it's a threat. All the while brands being like, oh wow, this is working really, really well. I'm going to keep pouring money into it. So.
One thing that brands are pouring money into more is micro-influencers and people with sort of smaller, more niche markets. Amber, how does that fit within your business strategy? Are these sort of friends and people that you're identifying, are they ultimately just micro-influencers?
Well, I mean, yeah, there's macro, micro, nano now as well. And I think people who are fans of a brand that are working with brands through Zyper they have full-time jobs, and they're not trying to be an influencer. They're working in an art gallery, they're a paramedic, and they're not a blogger or trying to get sort of brand deals. It's more that they just love this brand and they've been recognized by Banana Republic and now they can work with them. And so I think it's to do with follower numbers as well. So I mean, people who are brand fans often don't have a lot of followers. Like, we don't even really look at that. They might have 300 followers, but they really love that brand and have an engaged audience and authentically would be a great advocate for the brand. So I think we try and steer clear of that. Although what happens in the communities is that people then create better content, they get better engagement, and then they kind of do become micro-influencers, and then a platform might pick them up. So we don't mind, and that's fine.
Yeah. So, Instagram has been testing this hiding like counts publicly. can't speak publicly. You guys, what's your reaction to that? There's been all these media reports saying, oh, influencers are in trouble because of this, even though you guys will obviously be able to see the metrics behind the scenes. What effect do you think that this will have, if anything, on your business?
I think it's actually going to be beneficial. I don't know how you feel, but I think it's actually going to be very helpful because we can focus on the content. I know myself and my peers, like I'll post something and I'll just like obsessively just look at the post until it hits, I don't know, like 1,000 likes or something like that. And I think this will really allow us to just focus on the work that we have to do. It's up and then it's done. And we don't have to really worry about anything that goes up anymore.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I think it's very freeing. You can stop kind of tracking how it's doing and instead get back to how I originally started and what I was passionate about, and it was about creating content. And I'm a creative, and sometimes I shoot things that I think is going to be fantastic, but other people, they just don't like. And I'm measuring my success sometimes on a number, which it shouldn't validate that. I mean, this is not why I started this journey. So I think it will be very freeing, and it will just allow us to go back to, what we were originally passionate about and how we started.
Yeah. You become a prisoner to it sometimes.
Yeah. Well, you'll still be able to see all that detailed metrics behind the scenes.
I know, but nobody
it's just
else
for us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's also worth noting, do you guys use Instagram stories very much?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Because that's Instagram's fastest growing feature, and that has no public like counts or any public metrics. So it will be interesting. Well, we're going to take questions from the audience in 1 minute, so prepare. But just before we go, if you had to make maybe one prediction in terms of where influencer marketing is going, where do you see it in a couple of years?
Video.
Yeah, like all day.
I would say dark communities. I would say dark social. I think there's a huge return with Gen Z to like being anonymous and being in these private group chats and sharing their thoughts. And I think that's what we're trying to focus on as the next wave of how do brands get insight into those like private closed networks of friends.
I think the next few years we'll finally have someone like seriously compete with Instagram. TikTok is bigger than Instagram, because it's you can download it in China. But that's, like Vine, it'll be hard for brands to work on a comedy platform and a meme platform. But I do think there'll be a serious competitor to Instagram's dominance in a few years. And I think that, the industry in whole, as it grows, it just become like more commoditized. I think that like naturally prices will start to fall for influencers because there's so much supply that they're going to have to start competing on price. And like any other industry, things will kind of just get normal and boring, and it'll just be a part of things everyone does. And there'll be a new shiny thing that marketers are chasing.
All right, so let's get some questions from the audience. We'll start with you.
Good morning. My name is Lippy Roy. I'm a physician, and I specialize in addiction, mindfulness, and nutrition. And there's a real push to get more doctors to really share their information, their experience on social media. I've been really active on social media for years, but I'm trying to increase my Instagram kind of presence. And I've just noticed there's such a yearning in the public about information related to addiction and pain and trauma, loneliness. It impacts everybody. So particularly for the content creators, but really any of you, what are some suggestions you would give to a busy health professional, physician, but also to maximize the time that I have to get that message out there using social media? Thank you.
It's really tough to grow nowadays, and not to discourage you whatsoever, but I have to say that you have to leverage, and by that I mean even possibly going to other professionals and leveraging off one another, maybe doing an Instagram live or teaming up and getting questions from your followers, teaming up with that other professional, and you guys answer those questions together and tackle it that way. You're going to constantly have to do these things in order to grow. Otherwise, just putting yourself out there with content, and it's just such an abundance of content, you're probably going to get overlooked. So my biggest word of advice is just kind of leverage off one another.
I think, too, it's important to pinpoint what within your practice is very specific to you. I think whatever you can do to kind of stand out from your peers would really, really help you. And I find with medicine and with psych and loneliness, there are lots of pages just dedicated to quotes. And I see quote pages like with millions of followers, and I get them from my friends all of the time. So if there's anything that you can have in written form that you can just put on a graphic and post, it actually is much easier for you to create content that way. I would recommend doing that as well.
I would say if you start a quote page, double check the sources of the quotes.
And that's, yeah.
You will get called out.
Not so much quotes, but more just like little facts and tidbits that you can put in written form, I think would help. Yeah.
All right, next question.
Hi, my name is Jeff Robbins. I teach research writing courses at Rutgers on the corporation and technology. I wonder how influencers is carrying on a long tradition of celebrity, for example, started like the Marlboro Man or virtually all sports stars, Roger Federer advertising coffers and coffee and watches. Is this just a different medium, a different thing, carrying on a long tradition?
Yeah, what's the relation? I think, are you asking what's the differentiation between a celebrity endorsement and that, which has been an industry for a while, versus today's influencer economy?
Yeah, I think that we think about it like the difference between having an audience and having influence. Right, like Roger Federer is really influential. If I want to know what tennis racket to use, I don't give a shit what coffee he drinks, honestly. And so I think that's like where celebrity endorsements are a little hollow, is that they just slap a face that you know on it. But for influencers, they really have built a
brand
base of knowledge, and they're educating their audience. So if you're following a beauty influencer and they're giving beauty advice, they're like the Federer of putting foundation on, right? So you trust what they say about that. So I do think it's a little different, and I think that celebrities are struggling to compete in some ways now because they don't know how to build a community. They speak at their audience, not with them, and they are well followed because they're famous, and people like to follow famous people, not because they necessarily care what they say about products. So we generally don't work with people that are celebrities for that reason, because we find influencers so much more effective.
All right, we'll do one more.
Hi, my name's Deval Shah, and I had a question. Do you think there are any negatives for new brands launching who are using influencer marketers exclusively as a go-to-market strategy to come to market?
Good question.
I would say yes, because I think that you really need to do your research and find advocates who are genuinely passionate about your brand. And it's very easy with millions of influencer marketplaces to just lose money and burn money. So I think my position would be build that community, find passion early on. They will always be your advocates, real people.
Yeah, it doesn't work just alone. Like any other form of advertising, you can't just run retargeted Facebook ads and build a brand. It needs to be part of a much larger marketing stack.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much, Amber, James, Sai, Kelly.
Here to discuss spending with a message, please welcome Susie Deering, Chief Marketing Officer at eBay, Anjali Lai, Senior Analyst at Forrester, and here to lead the conversation is journalist John Donvan.
Oh, very nice. Comfortable. Yeah. Hi, Sal.
Thank you, everyone. While preparing for this conversation with these two experts who are hands-on in the business world and with the data and knowing the data, I had a thought about how our topic is one that absolutely wouldn't have existed maybe even 20, 30 years ago. We're going to be discussing the purpose-driven brand. And I was thinking back to what brands aspired to as an add-on message 20, 30 years ago. A brand like Cadillac was trying to tell you, not only will we get you from here to there, but you're going to really feel very successful if you're driving one of these cars. Or Hershey was trying to bring you back to your childhood. Or McDonald's McDonald's was a happy place. Coca-Cola. Are there any boomers here? Please let there be boomers. Please let there be boomers. Does anybody remember Coke's slogan from the 60s, early 70s? The real thing. The real thing. I mean, really? Was it? The real thing? But that was aspirational. I mean, it was metaphysical, actually. Exactly. But what we're talking about is those past brands, with the exception of the real thing metaphysical reach, they were focused on trying to tell the customer about an internal experience they would have from using the product. You'd feel successful in the Cadillac. You'd feel like a kid again with a Hershey bar. You'd feel happy if you went to McDonald's. That was about you. But we're discussing a trend that is much more about an expectation that the companies will do something, not to you, but out in the world out there. The purpose-driven brand. And Anjali, define what that means.
The purpose-driven brand?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the purpose-driven brand means that the company is no longer just thinking about the utilitarian benefits of the product or the experience, the direct benefits that they are delivering to a customer or to any stakeholder, so a shareholder or to an employee even. And instead, they're thinking about the other externalities that sort of surround their brand and their experience and the product. So they're thinking about things like the role in the community. They're thinking about having some sort of purpose or mission that's larger than just the function of their particular solution that they're serving up. And what I would add is that alongside the purpose-driven brand is the purpose-driven consumer or the values-driven consumer, who is also one that is not thinking about the direct benefits of a product that he or she is purchasing, but what that means for the larger context. What are the sort of indirect benefits that the customer gets from that particular item?
And Susie, at eBay, something else that I found in researching was that only last year, Haley Leibson was blogging in Forbes, and she said that the greatest, she put together a short list of the greatest purpose-driven companies of our generation, and the first company she listed was eBay. Do you plead guilty?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll take that all day. I think even kind of building on the purpose-driven brand and what the difference is, I think there's a massive difference when you look at it through a lens of marketing, because I think that many brands for so long were all about the campaign and what was the, what was the slogan and how was I going to put kind of that facade or that shellac to my company. Nothing's really changed in the sense that really as marketers, what we were trying to do is connect both the functional benefits to the emotional benefits, because we know that as humans, that's how you actually think through and justify and take action. And so if I look and I pivot to even, to where I am with eBay, it's actually been so wonderfully easy in some regards because it's not forced for us. It's at the core of how we exist. Pierre, when he founded the business, it was all founded on one principle that I absolutely love, which is he believed that people were basically good and that there was great good intention, and that he believed that in the sense of there were things that I have that I don't want, and that there are things that you don't, that you don't have that you do want, and how could he build technology to actually bridge that? And I think, that hasn't left our core. We have a purpose in the company. Our company purpose is 100% driven in every decision that we make, which is we empower people and enable economic opportunity. And that is embedded in every decision. It's embedded in our marketing promise. It's embedded in our values as a business. And so I think that's why we get that standard of being a company that really holds up to that purpose.
And was that a calculation, an add-on? How can we be successful? How can we get something going to the bottom line?
Well, I think that if you start back, Pierre didn't necessarily think that almost 25 years ago in September that he would be building this incredible marketplace. That wasn't his intention. His intention was, again, from a good place. Now, over time, obviously, it's been wildly successful. But what's also very different for eBay than many other marketplaces is we're successful because our sellers are successful. We're creating economic empowerment for them. And so, again, I think that the success success, yes, I mean, we do want to see success, but part of that success that we want to see is because, again, it means that there's sellers, there's small businesses, there's individuals, there's big companies that are successful on the other side of that equation. And I think that's a big, if we didn't, it's not waking up every day and going, okay, well, let me just figure out how do we make something that we just hope it gets picked up, or a product that has functionality to it that somebody cares about. We're building it from a care perspective first.
But I would assume there are a lot of other companies where the things that they're doing and they're performing in the purpose-driven under that heading are not actually central to the business the way that they are to eBay. For example, you might be in the car business and decide to go sustainable if you can. That's not necessarily what the cars are about, but it could be seen as an add-on. And my question to you, Anjali, is where is the impetus for this trend coming from? Is it coming from a demand by the consumers, or is it coming from the companies trying to figure out and game what the consumers will find appealing?
Yeah, I think the trend is starting with the consumer. So this is a case where we've seen over the past several decades that consumers are becoming more sensitive to company values, to the those externalities that we were talking about, how the company plays a role in the larger community. And in the data, we see that has been escalating pretty consistently. And then we hit a tipping point in the beginning of 2017 where in the US, 52% of US online adults said that they were actively thinking about company values when making a purchase. And that's across category, right? So of course there's some variation in terms of different product groups and different industries and things like that. But it's because consumers are hypersensitive to these company values, the effect that a brand has on the community, and because consumers are coordinated like they've never been before, right? If you think about with social media, with the internet, we have unprecedented access into what a company is doing, so we get that transparency that previously hadn't been seen, and we're able to be passionate and coordinated enough to demand change, to put pressure on leaders in ways that again weren't possible before. And so it's this values-based consumer that has really been the engine of the trend. But now we're also reaching a point where employees are sort of waking up to this as well. Consumers are employees, right? We are all consumers, are managers, consumers are the CEOs and the leaders as well. And so that same mindset is sort of infiltrating these different aspects of the business, and it's creating this sort of awakening or this revelation almost, where the leaders are now realizing that it's not just about staying relevant to a consumer or sort of following this cultural trend that's particularly topical at the moment. It's really about thinking deeply about how the company exists and the purpose of the company.
So the technology is critical to it, sounds like.
It is. I think, it's interesting because I would say that, to your point, so for so long, people said that they cared about these things, but their actions didn't always.
We heard that in an earlier panel today, actually.
And it's, I think that there's a reason for that in the sense that when it wasn't as accessible, I think that there were some basics that they were still waiting for you still had to get the basics and kind of foundational components right. And now it's becoming easier for you to make that your first way in, so that you can think about, truly, does a company have the values that I want? Is it somebody that I want to associate with? Yes, by the way, all of that other stuff still has to be there for me. And I think that I feel like there is something about a generational component, but there's also technology that is enabling consumers to have way more impact than what they've had in the past. And so just not saying, yes, I want that. I laugh. We would, when I was at Verizon, we would have this conversation about people cared about the environment. You ask somebody and go, do you care about the environment? What do you think they're going to say? Yes. And then you go, okay, well, what steps have you taken? And all of a sudden it was like, oh gosh, don't put me on the spot, don't know. It was too burdensome because there wasn't the feasibility for them to feel like they could take an active role. And now we're putting consumers where they can take an active role, and we have consumers who are growing up believing that they are the active role, that's their purpose, that's what they're supposed to do. So I think that it's just, in some cases, I think it's generations, but I feel like that technology is just enabling people to think very differently and to act very differently.
So that's why it would be generational as well.
Could be, but I think it's mindsets.
Not that boomers can't use Twitter.
Right. Well, and my other favorite thing is when we go, yes, all those young people, millennials, and I always laugh going, okay, have we not realized that millennials now are, I would like to say that they're still young because I'm on the other side of that, but they're late 30s, early 40s. The disruption is they care about something. They now have a means and an outlet to take action. Whereas my 16-year-old or my 20-year-old, that's just been the way of their life, right? Like that they don't, there's not an and or.
Right. Anjali, is there a set of values that are kind of on the list now that companies are expected to meet in order to, and I'm also interested, do the values that fit on this list, do they kind of fit under a progressive agenda?
What's interesting is that what I've seen, and as we're doing research, talking about values itself is sometimes perceived as being a liberal agenda. For some reason, that just seems to be the expectation or the sentiment. But it's not. In reality, that's not necessarily the case, right? It doesn't have to be that way. And when you talk about sort of a set of values that are on the consumer's mind, what I see is that that's not always the right way about, to go about this, right? So what I love about the example that you gave is that the values, yes, you're using them to sort of give, meaning to the consumer and enable the consumer to act on the values that he or she cares about, but it starts with the company. It starts with the leader. It starts with it's part of the origin story. And so when a brand is looking to make this pivot towards a values-driven strategy, it has to start with some deep internal reflection. You have to take a hard look at what does your brand stand for. And I think it's so fitting that you started with companies like McDonald's, like Coca-Cola, that have typically sort of followed the cultural trend, or you have to have that cultural intuition. And this requires some of that, but it also requires much more self-reflection.
Just as an aside, you said that Pierre started out thinking that most people are basically good. You have a lot of data. Are they? What's the answer?
It's a good, of course they're good.
Oh, okay.
I think, and it's funny because we use that example all the time in the sense of we're a marketplace that really enables people to make those connections. And I laugh because I go, gosh, 25 years ago, we should have probably woken up and realized that we were probably one of the first social networks that really existed, because people, they correct each other. And, we're there to obviously make sure that there's the right protections for both sides of our marketplace. But I think at the end of the day, yes, there's still people that have, ill intention, yes. Right. But I really do believe that there's still more good out there than we give credit to.
One area where I'm sorry for interrupting, but one area where I could see some tension for eBay is eBay is, at the end of the day, its own enormous corporation, which has had an enormous impact on how retail happens in this country. I'm not holding it responsible for the death of downtown retail, and I know that you have a program to respond to that. But what about, how do you reconcile being this monolith, this monstrously large company, with these little guys these sellers who are also your customers?
Yeah, I think it starts by the fact, again, we go to our company purpose, which is empower people and create economic opportunity. And that enables us to where we don't own inventory. We're not competing. We're not putting our brands up against our sellers. And you have to remember that it's me as a seller, and it's other big box retailers who are selling on our platform. And so for us, going back to kind of retail revival, our point is we need...
Tell us in one sentence what retail revival is.
Retail revival is where we've gone into communities that need revitalization and have not taken their storefronts and put them in access to 180 countries and basically take e-commerce. We believe e-commerce is a disruption, but also can be an empowerment to small business. And we believe that it can also revitalize. I don't believe that bricks and mortar is dead. We believe that there's still a component and a place at which it needs to exist. We're there to help them actually take their bricks and mortar stores and give them access to 180 countries outside of just maybe their main street. And we know that that's important because we also know from the consumer that they care about unique and selection. They like the uniqueness and they like selection. They're done with a sea of sameness. They're done with the fact that you're going to force all this stuff on me and tell me what I need. They want to be able to go and create their own individuality. They want to have that self-expression, and they want to have that access.
So are you doing that because it's a nice thing to do, or are you doing that because it's good for the business?
We're doing it because it's good for our sellers, and what's good for our sellers ends up being good for us. And so even that slight little shift as far as your mindset, there's nothing more fulfilling. We just came from Vegas, where we hosted just under 2,000 sellers that are small, medium-sized sellers. And sitting there with somebody that's a seller in Akron, Ohio, that never had access to outside of their main street in Akron, Ohio, and now they've sold to 17 countries, and to watch their face just light up with excitement that they are able to extend their profitability as a business because we're giving them the platform to have that access.
Angela, you mentioned before that employees are also now part of this, having this expectation that their companies will be purpose-driven. And there's the example recently, just last month, of the furniture company up in Boston, Wayfair, had a big order from ICE detention centers, and something like 10% of their workers walked out and protested. And I know before you said there's a perception that all values would reflect the liberal agenda. And I know we're in New York City, the liberal agenda is just the agenda. But
from California.
And California. How does this not get into politics for companies?
I mean, it does, right? It inherently does. And I think that is something that leaders need to be prepared for. Otherwise, if they're sort of, trying to keep their head in the sand and steer clear and sort of tread this neutral ground that is safe space, they end up getting blindsided, and consumers are against the ones that will hold them accountable for making a statement and then following through with a certain behavior, a certain commitment to that. And so I think it's a moment where leaders, brands do have to be comfortable with taking a side and standing by that decision. And the way that you do that is, again, looking at your core, looking at where there is sort of an overlap of what is relevant to the business, what is resonant with your consumer and your employee and other stakeholders, so you can find sort of pockets of that intersection or the overlap. But it means, and we hear in the data as well, that consumers say brands are no longer neutral. There is no longer such thing as a neutral brand. It just doesn't exist. And if a brand is not being transparent about what it's standing for, then it must be hiding something.
Questions? Right over in the orange shirt.
Okay. Wow. What service holding the mic for me? I'm a fan of what eBay does. I work at Engage for Good. We've honored eBay for its eBay for charity. And I'm curious about retail revival and the sort of conundrum between the real world, bricks and clicks. I think that you've been in probably about 10 markets, Lansing and others, some abroad. And yet it is in some ways symbolic in that there's only a few markets that you've been able to touch.
Sir,
are there ideas that you have for taking this to a larger audience and empowering more retailers?
Yeah, so we do believe that there's a scalability component of it. And I think part of that we're still trying to figure out, exactly how do we do that effectively. But we first had to start by saying, does it have impact? The answer is yes. And so now that we see that it has impact, there is definitely a plan for us to continue to scale it. And this is where I would say that the big thing for us is, again, it's not about that retail is dead. Retail is alive and well. It's about making sure you're making those connections and enabling the balance of both a physical space and a digital space to be able to come together.
Another question?
I'm
sorry.
Hi, ladies. Thank you so much. This has actually been very informative. So previously, I've built and shipped product. Instagram and Facebook focus on small businesses. And now I've since pivoted to really be looking at values and how you can build D2C channels like this. I'm very, very curious, in your experience, what's the most effective way to really build teams and innovation around values? How do you bring people together? Because I see CEOs, COOs, and C-suite as sometimes a challenge to really align around missions, value-based, and translating that to your consumer and your audience.
And Angela, can these things come more from the bottom up?
Yeah, I think they absolutely can. There are two sort of models, right? One is where the leader is sort of deciding, this is the story of the brand, these are the values that I stand for, and this is how it sort of percolates through the organization. The other way is that it is very much a grassroots, and we've seen that with some companies like Lush, for instance, where the organization will sort of crowdsource different sustainability sustainability-related campaigns that employees are naturally passionate about, and then management will give funding to allow employees to follow through on those projects. In either case, though, you need to have both the management and the employees aligned, right? You need to have them, you need to have buy-in from both sides, and oftentimes that comes from some sort of co-creation effort. And the examples that you were giving, right, enabling a seller is similar to sort of enabling an employee in the sense that, this is a moment where the employee can fulfill his or her own, purpose or mission, right? Find that meaning in his or her own life. And so that's the sort of sentiment that has to be tapped into in order to bring that out. And when you get to that place of empathy, when you tap into that, people are wanting to contribute in that particular way. So it's a very natural sort of.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think, number one, I think we've always asked for this, and it's one thing for it to come from the top and be stated. It's another thing to be, as an employee, hold your leadership accountable to it. And that is something that we absolutely do. The other piece is it's got to change your hiring practice. Because if you don't hire people who believe in that same values of your business, then how do you expect that you're going to actually be able to live that up and make sure that that stands when you start to show up to your customer?
Yeah, I just want to add a very, very quick point to that. So on the note around, hiring for these individuals, even, finding an alignment with your own values and your consumer values, one important piece is, I think a purpose-driven brand has to have the courage to disinvite individuals that don't have the alignment and values. And when, that's a very scary prospect for companies and leaders that are looking at, simply revenue metrics and other sort of returns. But that courage to disinvite those that aren't aligned is critical. Yep.
Anjali, Susie, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And now, please welcome Sarah LaFleur, CEO of LaFleur. And please welcome back the Atlantic's Adrian Green.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi. How
you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. So we just heard a panel about folks who are shopping based on their values, that they really care about companies who export their values through their products.
Yeah.
Talk about how purpose and values play a role at LaFleur.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. I think I am the last person standing between you and lunch, so we'll try to make this fun and lively. So purpose-driven, I think you could say that I got into this business because I myself see myself as my customer. We are a clothing brand for busy working women, or purposeful women, as we like to say. And actually, when I was pitching investors initially, they would say, I don't really understand the need for this business. And so maybe I could actually ask you all to help you understand why brands like us exist. First, I'm going to ask the men in the room how long it took you to get ready this morning. Just raise your hand. So if it took you 15 minutes, raise your hand.
Less.
Less. Okay. Do we have 5 minutes in the audience? Oh, lots of hands in 5 minutes. Good job, gentlemen. 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour. No? An hour and a half? No takers. Okay. I will now ask the women in the audience, if it took you under 15 minutes to get ready this morning, please stand up. That's amazing. Well done. Well done. No, that's really a round of applause. 30 minutes. Yeah, more hands going up. 45 minutes. An hour. That's me this morning since I got my hair blown out for all of you. An hour and a half. Anyone? 2 hours? Okay, this is an impressive group, I have to say. When I usually ask this question, I see the most number of hands for women go up at about an hour to an hour and a half. For men, 15 minutes or less. There's actually a study that says women on average spend 15 more days getting ready for work compared to men a year, 15 more days. So I just want you to imagine what you would do with 15 more days a year, go on vacation, et cetera, et cetera. So when I think of my company and how it serves this purpose, really my goal is to help my customers get out of the house as quickly as possible in the morning by providing clothing that goes together, that's seamless, that's machine washable, that's wrinkle resistant, so you're not having to pull out your ironing board at 7:55 a.m. when you have to leave the house at 8. I'm sure many of us have been there. So that's really how I think of ourselves as a purpose-driven brand. We say that we believe in a world where when women succeed, the world is a better place. And that's a very grand mission statement that we're putting out there, but the way we contribute to that is by providing incredible clothing.
Absolutely. You have a background in finance. What is your relationship to fashion? How did you?
Really no relationship. I never thought I would go into retail. My mother worked in fashion. She worked for a luxury brand based out of Tokyo and Paris. And so I think in some ways the apple did not fall far from the tree. But she was the odd one out in my family. Most of my family, they were civil servants, worked in government. My dad was a State Department employee for 37 years. So I thought I was going to follow in his footsteps. But I was working in management consulting and then in finance. And I myself experienced this problem of staring into my closet. And I mean, I would think to myself, like, God, I've got nothing to wear, even though I had a closet full of clothes. And so I was working in private equity. It was a really hard job. I was one of 2 women out of 170 front office employees. I decided that it wasn't the place for me. And so I basically quit on a whim. And I didn't really know what to do with my life at that point. This was when I was 27, and I feel like I had ruined my resume in perpetuity. And it was kind of at that point where I was thinking, okay, well, I've always had this idea for better workwear for working women. Maybe now would be the chance to give it a try. And so that's how I ended up starting it.
Were you thinking about your own closet, lots of pantsuits and jackets? How did you think about the makeup of the clothes?
I mean, it was, I think one thing that really struck me was the dry cleaning bill. So I hear laughter in the audience. Dry cleaning, one day someone's got to fight this fight, but it's an extremely sexist industry. So just think about the dress. Okay, the women in the audience know, like, if you take your dress to dry cleaning, it's minimum, $12. In New York, I think it averages $15 to $20 now, versus a men's shirt that's $5. And by the way, the amount of fabric that each piece of clothing uses is approximately the same. So why are women getting charged triple, quadruple for it? And I had this dress that I loved. It was a simple shift dress, and I wore it all the time. And I think I paid almost $300 for it, but I realized after 4 years of owning that dress, I had actually paid $1,250 to take care of that dress. So I think those were a lot of the things that I was honing in on. And when I initially met my creative director, Miyako, yes, you can rest assured, I am not the designer. I just control the money, as I like to say. So my creative director, Miyako, she was the former head designer at Zac Posen. She had worked with Jason Wu, came from this really illustrious fashion background. And when I first met her, I was saying, don't you know these women who walk to work in flats and they have these, huge Longchamp bags that they basically carry their life around in this bag. And when they get into the elevator, they switch out from their flats to their heels. And she went, no, I've never met anyone like that in my life. So I just thought that was such an aha moment for me, seeing the big disconnect between the fashion designers and the people who dream about what working women were like. I remember her saying, I thought you wanted to show a little bra strap, to keep it sexy. And I was like, oh God, no, that's the last thing you want to be doing at work. And so a lot of it came from, yes. Sorry, I just fell right into that one. But I think a lot of what I'm doing is just trying to put my customers in front of my fashion designers. My design team is really an incredible team. I've got designers from Calvin Klein, The Row, Stella McCartney, Jason Wu, really the who's who of fashion, now working at MM designing for these women. But really, my biggest job is, I think, putting these designers in front of my customers who are, for the most part, working in offices or are moms who are really busy and have to be running around all the time, and making sure that they understand their concerns. That's really my main responsibility.
You talked earlier about female empowerment, right?
Yes.
That you were one of 2 women in your office place, and presumably for some of the women that you're working with, that's also their reality. How are you empowering them kind of in the styling process?
Oh, thank you for asking that. If I talk about my customers, I have customers who are congresswomen, senators, CEOs of big companies, anchors of big news sites, and I've worked a lot with some of them personally, and I think one thing that strikes me is they are so confident and so intelligent and so sure of themselves in many aspects of their lives, but often when it comes to clothing, they're like, I don't know, does blue go with navy? And it's just like one of those questions where you're like, as someone who likes fashion and who loves fashion, you're like, of course they go together. But I just see how many women don't care about it. I shouldn't say don't care about it. It's not their primary priority. They're not poring over the pages of Vogue thinking like, ooh, what's happening on the runway this season? They're like, my goal is to get out of the door as fast as I possibly can, and hopefully I look stylish when I step into the office. And so really what I think we're trying to do is help these women saying like, you do your job so well, we do this part of the job really well, so let us help you. In our stores, usually what our customers do is they have a one-on-one appointment with our stylist. It's 60 minutes. We don't have any merchandise on the floor. So the stylist pre-pulls these items for our customers to try, and we say, okay, these are the items that we think are going to work for you. We want to make this the most efficient hour of your life. We only want to see you in the showroom 4 times a year, and let's go on your way. It's not really meant to be this, let's overwhelm you with merchandise. It's meant to be, okay, here are the 5 things that we're going to give you, and here are the 20 ways you can wear them.
Absolutely. When I think about shopping, I'm the kind of person where I'm like, both I have nothing to wear and I still hate shopping.
Yes.
And it seems like that's a similar sentiment to some of your customers. So what exactly is it about shopping that they dislike? You mentioned being overwhelmed. Is it that, like having to go through too many racks, or? I mean,
decision paralysis is, I think, a huge part of it. I can just tell you from personal experience when I was a working woman, and Mondays through Fridays, like I'm just too exhausted by the time I get out of work. By the way, usually I wasn't getting out before midnight, so Bloomingdale's is closed by then. And then on the weekends, I would roll into Bloomingdale's or Nordstrom's on Sunday. I would be there with all the other tourists. I'm combing through racks and racks and racks. I find the one shirt that I think works from the front, and then I turn it around and I see a big gaping hole in the back. So I was like, well, I cannot wear this to work. And so I think that's an experience that a lot of working women, that resonates with a lot of working women. There was a piece that Fast Company had written about us called "This is the Brand for Women Who Hate to Shop," and that article went viral. And I think a lot of women were saying, I'm the women who hate to shop. But I think a lot of other retailers, department store leaders were saying to us, like, that's not true. Like, women love to shop. It's a social activity. This is how they like to spend their weekends. And maybe that's true for certain categories of clothing, but I think for the majority of women, workwear shopping has been something that they hate. They would much rather be doing something else. And I think we're trying to bring joy into that process by making it as easy as possible.
There's a digital aspect to this as well. Shopping feels like a lot of a very physical experience. Obviously, you're putting clothes on bodies. How are you thinking about customizing that and using the kind of digital tools that you use in your business model?
I think one thing that maybe makes us different from some of the more, I don't want to say digital first brands, but maybe algorithm driven brands. We don't want our customers to feel like there is a machine working in the background trying to figure out what works best on you. I think for me, I always prefer to interact with a human. Like if I'm in a dressing room, I don't want to have to touch an iPad to get someone to bring me a size 6 instead of a size 4. I would just rather say, like, can you bring me a size 6? And just have someone bring me a size 6. And so we have a lot of technology in the background that aids our stylists. The way I like to explain it to my investors is it's often like a financial advisor. A financial advisor, you want to be able to interact with them face to face and actually hear their feedback, but the financial advisor might be using tools in the background to help you just help understand what would work best for that customer, and that's how a lot of our stylists operate as well.
And so when you're talking about bringing size 6s and interfacing with these designers, the thing that I'm thinking about is inclusivity.
Yes.
So this is a very Project Runway
I love
question.
It. Yeah.
Who is the MM LaFleur woman, and are the sizes that are available inclusive for everyone? I know you talked about congresswomen and senators and all of that, but the range of bodies that you would have to dress seems like a wide range.
I know, and actually so I primarily grew up in Japan, and when you go to Japan, you'll see everyone is very small. And I walked into a retailer once and they had 3 sizes. So I was like, God, SKU management in this business must be so easy. But it's not the case in America. We've got a lot of different sizes, a lot of different proportions. So that's something that we've been really focused on since day one. We serve from 0P, so that's 0 petite, all the way up to what we call 3+, which is the equivalent of roughly 24W. And so that's a really wide range that we're serving, especially a wide range for a startup like us. I think that's, those are moves that you see companies like Banana Republic or Ann Taylor making. Actually, I don't think they've gone. And Ann Taylor, I know, does a lot of petites, but not necessarily. I think a lot on the plus size. Don't quote me on that. I don't want to say that. But J. Crew, I know that for sure. And then I think for us, it felt like we can't say that we're serving all purposeful women without actually offering plus sizes. A lot of our executives that we serve are plus size, and what we've seen with our customers is that we actually have equal age distribution between ages 25 and 55. That's one of our points that we're really, really proud of. I think there are very few brands out there that say, okay, we're for a wide range of customers, as opposed to saying like, we're for the millennials, or we're for the teenagers, or we're for retirees. We see a lot of moms shopping with daughters, or daughters saying, this is the one brand where my mom and I share clothes, and we actually love that about our customers.
So when you're working with fashion, people in the fashion industry, they're sometimes resistant to dressing folks of different sizes, right? That's a stereotypical problem in fashion at large. Are you having those conversations with the designers that you work with, and have they been mostly receptive to the efforts that you're making?
I think that's one thing where Miyako, my creative director, is just, she's so unlike your typical designer. I mean, if you can imagine, she used to design for the runway and would dress Natalie Portman for the Golden Globes, and that kind of, she was that kind of designer. And I think she felt at some point, like anything she made wouldn't actually end up on a real person. So she had never actually seen her clothes in the wild, as we like to say. And I think when I still remember that moment when she and I were walking down Soho together, and we saw our dresses on a customer. It was just down Prince Street, and she was like, "Oh my God, I've never seen a piece that I've designed being worn by an actual woman walking down the street." And I think it was just that magical moment for her where it suddenly clicked. And so she loves designing for these women, and we do these VIP dinners where we'll have someone from the astrophysics department from University of Washington sitting next to someone who is a human rights advocate, sitting next to someone who's an anchor at NPR. And I think she sees these women and she was like, I can't believe that I get to design for these kinds of women. So it's not sexy by traditional retail and fashion standards. I think my goal always is that I tell her one day I'm going to have you win a CFDA, although I think the fashion world almost doesn't know what to do with us. They're like, they're a tech business. And then the tech world is like, they're a fashion business. So we're like the ugly stepchild by both industries. But I think she really brings her talents to dressing the women who are walking down the street. And that is something, I'm extremely proud of.
I have one last question before we take it to questions. Many retailers are embracing e-commerce. They're closing their brick and mortar stores and they're moving digitally, and you're kind of running in the opposite direction.
Yes.
You're opening showrooms all across the country. What's the thinking behind that?
The truth is, I think we just always saw traction with our retail stores. We had the benefit of being maybe a year or two behind the Bonobos and the Warby Parkers of the world, and they were always saying like, we'll never open brick and mortar, we'll never open brick and mortar, and then lo and behold, they started opening brick and mortar. And so even when we were we had this tiny 700 square foot office above a methadone clinic in the garment district, and I mean, it was not a place where you wanted to bring your customers. There were mice running around and all that, but every now and then we would say, customers, like, come on over and try on our clothes. And I mean, if you just want to talk numbers, the basket size was always higher. I mean, the conversion rate was always close to 100%. And so we saw the magic of that versus online. If a size is not working for a customer, then she can easily get frustrated, return the product, and never try you again. And so I think I've always just believed in the power of that. I think for us, the question is, how do we do it in a financially responsible way? I mean, that's why in New York, we ended up not taking on ground floor retail. Our showroom / store is on 42nd between 6th and 7th Avenue, but we're on the 13th floor, and so the rent is just much more sustainable. We had another showroom in NoHo, and now we're actually, for the first time, we're going to try a ground floor location at Brookfield Mall. Whereas in other locations, we've got 8 stores across the country. We've tried brick and mortar ground floor, and the rent in some of these areas, it's like $2,000, $3,000, and so we've just been much more opportunistic about it. We try to sign on short-term leases as much as possible. The 5 to 10-year leases scare the hell out of us. So we're always looking for, I guess, what you could call pop-up spaces that we end up actually using as stores.
Absolutely. Question in the back. Hi. I'm a veterinarian.
Hi.
Hi.
I've got an 85-pound dog.
So I love your MO, and one of the things that I'm a 5-minute getting dressed person.
Yes.
Mostly because I can. I wear scrubs at work. I can come in sweatpants. It's not a big deal for me. I feel like a slob. I hate it. Mostly because the other option is to dress in really nice clothes that I don't want to get dirty and I'm on the floor all the time.
Yes.
I would love for you to market to us.
I would love to market to you.
We're mostly women in our field.
Yes.
And I feel like most of us look like this.
First of all, I'm sure your primary concern is, how do I not get dog hair and cat hair all over your clothes?
To look professional, and but not to wear clothes that are easy to clean.
Yes.
And I don't feel bad about getting dirty.
I completely understand. I think one thing we're also seeing just generally, I mean, when I say we dress working women, I think even 5 years ago, what people would imagine is someone wearing a blazer and a skirt and they're going to the courthouse or something. But the truth is, most of our customers, a lot of our customers, first of all, they work in WeWork spaces. They have much more flexible lifestyles, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're wearing jeans and a hoodie to work. Actually, we had one customer, she's like, a very well-paid executive in San Francisco, and she says, I make a ton of money. Like, I don't want to wear a sweatshirt to work. And so we actually really started designing with customers like that in mind. We have our best-selling product for the past 3 years has been this pant called the Foster pant, which I asked Miyako, my creative director, to make because I said I wanted yoga pants that look like work pants. So the creativity she did there, she got rid of the seam in the front. I think one of my things with work pants often leaves a line at the end of the day after sitting for 12 hours at your desk. And so that pant has been a bestseller both for our women in tech as well as the women working in law firms. And I think it would be great for someone who has a more active lifestyle. We also do a lot of machine washable. This, for example, is machine washable. I didn't have to dry clean it. I didn't have to iron it. We do a lot of those kinds of pieces. So please check us out. If you even give me your email, I will send you a referral code. Yes.
Well, Sarah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
So, when women succeed, the world is a better place. That's a lovely thought to end on. Thank you so much, Sarah LaFleur, Adrian Green. That's a wrap. I also want to thank all our speakers and moderators, and to give another shout out to Nestle for making this morning's gathering possible. And I also want to thank you, no matter how long it took you to get ready to get here, you all look and are fabulous. So thank you for spending so much time with us. I know how valuable your time is, and we really appreciate you spending so much of it with us. I hope you leave here with a keener understanding of the retail landscape and what consumers want. I have one last request before you go. You will either have a survey on your table, or you'll get an email from me. We'd love to get your feedback. It's really valuable, and we read it all. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day.